They told me to leave the key under the mat and not to worry about anything except feeding the cat. You'll be more comfortable at home, Mom. That's what my son said before loading the last suitcase into the trunk. His wife didn't say anything at all. She just smiled the way you smile at someone you've already stopped seeing. They were going to Tuscany, 2 weeks. My granddaughter Sophie had just turned 16, and my son said it was a milestone trip, something special for the family. I found out about it the way I found out about most things those days, by accident. A folder left open on the kitchen counter, printed itineraries, hotel confirmations, a handwritten packing list in my daughter-in-law's neat, tight script. 4 names, not 5. I didn't say anything. I folded the papers back the way I'd found them and went to start dinner. That night, I lay in bed and counted the years. 67 of them. Most of them spent making sure everyone else had what they needed before I asked for anything myself. I'd raised my son alone after my husband Richard left when the boy was 9. I'd worked nights at the hospital for 11 years, so I could be home when he got off the school bus. I'd moved across the country when he married, because he asked me to, because they needed help with the baby. I'd given up the apartment I loved, the friends I'd had for decades, the little routines that made me feel like a person rather than a function. I fed the cat for 3 days. On the 4th morning, I woke up before the sun and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before I touched it. The house was very quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful but empty. I looked at the refrigerator where Sophie had taped a drawing she made when she was 7. A woman with wild gray hair and enormous shoes, labeled Grandma Maggie in purple crayon. I hadn't noticed it in years. It had just become part of the wall. I went to the bedroom and opened the closet where I kept the things I never used anymore. Behind the winter coats and the box of Christmas ornaments, I found my old travel bag. Canvas, olive green, a little battered. Richard and I had bought it at a market in New Mexico on our honeymoon. We'd always meant to fill it with stamps from other countries. We never got the chance. I pulled it out and set it on the bed. Then I opened my laptop and looked up flights to Morocco. I want to be honest about this. I was afraid. I hadn't traveled alone since I was 24 years old. I didn't speak Arabic or French. I had a bad knee that complained on stairs. I was 67, and the world had gotten louder and faster since the last time I moved through it on my own terms. Every reasonable voice in my head told me to put the bag back, close the laptop, go feed the cat again. I booked a flight to Marrakech. Departure in 4 days. I called my neighbor Diane and asked if she'd check on the house. Of course, she said. Are you visiting family? Not exactly, I told her. She paused. Good for you, she said simply, and I could hear in her voice that she understood something I hadn't fully said. I packed light. Comfortable sandals, 2 linen blouses, the blue cardigan Sophie had given me for Christmas 3 years ago that I'd never worn because I was saving it for a special occasion and had apparently been waiting for the right kind of special. A journal I'd bought at the drugstore with the intention of writing in it every day and never once opened. I tucked it into the front pocket of the bag and told myself this time would be different. The night before I left, I sat on the back porch and listened to the neighborhood. Someone was mowing a lawn 3 houses down, even though it was almost 8 o'clock. A dog was barking in long, patient intervals. I thought about calling my son to tell him where I was going. I decided not to. Not out of spite. Just because for once I wanted to do something without explaining myself first. I turned the porch light off, went inside, set my alarm for 5 in the morning, slept better than I had in months. The airport felt like a foreign country before I'd even left the one I was in. Everything moved too fast and too confidently, people pulling rolling suitcases like they were born attached to them. I moved slowly and tried not to apologize for it. That's something I'd spent a lifetime doing. Apologizing for taking up space, for moving at my own pace, for needing a moment to think. The gate agent checked my passport and handed it back without comment. On the plane, I had a window seat. I watched the ground fall away and felt something strange in my chest. Not quite fear, not quite joy, something in between, like a door swinging open onto a room you'd forgotten existed. I slept for most of the flight. When I woke, we were over the ocean, and the sky outside was that deep, specific blue that doesn't exist anywhere except above clouds. I pressed my hand against the window for a moment, for no reason at all, and left a faint print there. Marrakech hit me like a warm wall the second I stepped outside the terminal. The air smelled of exhaust and something floral and faintly smoky underneath. Taxis lined up in a long, honking row. A man held a sign with someone else's name. I found my cab, gave the driver the address Diane had helped me find online, and sat in the back watching the city open up around me as we drove. The riad was in the Medina, down a lane so narrow I thought the cab had made a wrong turn. But the driver stopped and pointed and said something I didn't understand, but took to mean here. I got out, knocked on a wooden door painted blue. A woman opened it. She was perhaps a few years older than me, small and upright with silver hair, pulled back simply, and dark eyes that assessed me in one quick, unguarded look. Her name was Fatima. She ran the riad with her daughter and had been doing so for 20 years. She showed me to my room, which had a small window cut into the thick wall, and a bed with a white linen cover, and a clay pitcher of water on the table beside it. She asked if I'd eaten. I hadn't. She brought bread and olives and a glass of mint tea so sweet it almost hurt. I ate alone at a low table in the courtyard, while orange trees held the evening light above me. A fountain ran in the center, just a small thing, a trickle really, but the sound of it filled the space in a way that felt like the riad had been breathing all along, and I'd only just arrived in time to hear it. I didn't cry, but I sat there for a very long time after I'd finished eating, just listening to the water and the sounds of the city murmuring somewhere on the other side of the walls. I woke the next morning to the sound of the call to prayer. It came through the window like something old and unhurried, and I lay still and let it wash through the room. Then I put on my blue cardigan and went downstairs. Fatima was already in the courtyard with coffee. She gestured at the chair across from her without ceremony, as though it had always been mine. We didn't speak much that first morning. She was a woman comfortable with silence in the way that people are when they've earned it, rather than retreated into it. After breakfast, I went out alone into the Medina. I want to be honest about this part too. I got lost within the first 20 minutes. The lanes folded into each other without logic, stalls bloomed out of walls, children ran through gaps that looked too small to fit a thought. A man tried to sell me a rug. Another offered to show me to the square for $5. I said no thank you, and took a wrong turn, and ended up at a dead end, where a cat was sleeping on a doorstep in a patch of sun. I sat down on a low stone step and looked at my useless map and laughed. It came out of me suddenly, a real laugh, the kind that has some surprise in it. The cat opened one eye and closed it again. I put the map away and started walking by feel instead. That was how I found the spice market, by following the smell, and the ceramics alley, by following the color, and the old woman selling flat bread from a basket who waved me over and tore off a piece and handed it to me without asking for anything in return. I ate it standing in a lane while donkeys passed on either side of me. I hadn't felt this present in years, not performing being somewhere, actually there. That evening, checking my phone for the first time since I'd landed, I found 4 missed calls from my son, 2 texts from my daughter-in-law. Diane says you're traveling. Where are you? And then, Mom, please call us. I set the phone face down on the bed and opened my journal instead. I wrote, I have been so careful not to inconvenience anyone that I forgot to inconvenience myself into living. Fatima and I fell into a rhythm by the 3rd day. Coffee in the courtyard. She would tell me something about the neighborhood, a story about one of the market vendors, a memory from the years before tourism changed the texture of certain streets. I would listen. She spoke English with a French accent and a Moroccan directness that I found deeply restful after decades of people saying things politely that they didn't mean. On the 4th morning, she asked, carefully, as though she already knew the answer, Your family, do they know where you are? I told her the short version, the trip to Tuscany, the 4 names and not 5, the cat. She listened without interrupting, which is rarer than it sounds. Then she said, How long did you wait before you decided to stop waiting? I didn't have an answer. I looked at the orange trees. She nodded like I had said something. By the end of the first week, I had figured out the Medina by feel, which stalls had the best olives, which lane took you to the quiet fountain square where old men played cards in the afternoon. I'd bought a scarf, rust and gold, not the kind I would have chosen before this trip. Before this trip, I chose things that wouldn't call attention. My knee ached at the end of each day. I'd take my shoes off at the door of the riad and sit with my feet up and my journal and write until dinner. The pages filled faster than I expected. Things I hadn't said in years came out of me sideways, through the pen, not accusatory, just honest. The birthday my son forgot 2 years running. The way his wife spoke to me sometimes. Not cruelly, just as though I wasn't entirely there. The moment last Christmas when I'd overheard her say to my son that she thought it would be easier if I had my own place. Somewhere nearby, but not so present. I'd pretended not to hear. I'd gone to the kitchen and refilled everyone's wine glass and smiled and stayed in my lane and kept myself small and folded. I didn't fold anymore. There was no room for it here. The Medina's lanes were too narrow. You had to walk straight. You had to take up exactly the space you occupied. On the 9th day, my son left a voicemail. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the edges of something underneath. Mom, I don't understand what's happening. Are you okay? Please just let us know you're safe. The kids are asking questions. I noticed he said the kids, plural. Sophie wasn't a kid. She was 16. She was the one always asking questions. He meant the younger ones, his wife's 2 from before, who called me Grandma Maggie and meant it. That detail sat with me. I didn't call back. But that night I wrote Sophie a postcard I'd bought at a market stall. It had a photo of the Kutubia Mosque at sunset. Sophie, I'm in Morocco. The light here is the color of something you'd want to paint. I hope your trip is everything they promised it would be. Write me back when you can. Love, Grandma Maggie. I dropped it in the post and didn't wait to see if she'd respond. On the 11th day, Fatima knocked on my door with a second cup of coffee and sat on the edge of the low chair by the window and said, without preamble, I have a friend in Fez, a woman, widowed, retired. She drives there next week, and there is a room in her house for a traveler who doesn't need to be looked after. I looked at her. You don't need to be looked after, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a report of what she'd observed. I thought about my return ticket, still sitting unclaimed in my email. Departure in 3 days. I thought about the house I'd go back to, the cat, the refrigerator with Sophie's crayon drawing, the key under the mat. Tell your friend I'll take the room, I said. I changed my flight that afternoon. My hands were steady while I did it. Fez was older than anything I had words for. Not ancient in the way museums are ancient, preserved and roped off. Ancient in the way that had kept on living anyway, layer on layer, the old city breathing under the new one. Fatima's friend was a woman named Nadia, small and sharp-humored, who taught me how to navigate the souks by identifying sounds instead of landmarks. The metal workers are to the left, the leather is north. When you smell cedar, you're close to the furniture quarter. When you smell nothing, you've gone too far. I took notes in my journal like a student. She showed me a tannery where the dye pits had been running for 6 centuries. I stood at the railing above them, looking down at the circles of color saffron, indigo, poppy red, and thought about all the things that had been made in the same place, over and over, by hands that didn't know each other across time. I thought about the things I'd made, too. The home, the dinners, the carefully managed silences. All of it offered up, without asking whether it was wanted, the way I wanted to be wanted. That night, Nadia cooked tagine, and we ate on the roof under a sky so full of stars it looked like something a child had invented. She asked about America. I asked about her life before widowhood. We traded stories the way travelers do, honestly and without the self-consciousness that comes from seeing someone every day. She said, "You're not what I expected." I asked what she'd expected. She said, "Someone who needed to be fixed, but you just needed room." I thought about that for a long time afterward. My phone had been accumulating messages like sediment. 12 from my son, 6 from my daughter-in-law, 1, finally, from Sophie, short and unguarded. "Grandma, I got your postcard. I'm obsessed that you're in Morocco alone." Tuscany was okay, but Mom and Dad argued the whole second week, and honestly, it kind of sucked. "You had the right idea. Can you call me when you get a chance?" "I miss you." I read it 3 times. Then I read my daughter-in-law's most recent message. "Maggie, I don't know how to reach you right now, but I want you to know we're not angry, we're worried. Whatever we did, I'm sorry. Please just let someone know you're safe." I noticed she said whatever we did. Not I know what we did, but it was something. The shape of an acknowledgement, even if the details were still blurry. I put the phone in my bag and finished my tea. There are moments in traveling alone when it stops feeling like something you're doing and starts feeling like something you are. I can't tell you exactly when that happened for me. somewhere between the tannery and the night market where I ate merguez, standing at a stall and didn't wipe my mouth decorously, but let the grease shine on my chin because no one there was watching me to see if I did it right. Somewhere between the morning, I woke up with the musin and lay there not making a list of everything I needed to do for other people, but just watching the light move across the ceiling and deciding it was enough. I was 67. I had good years left, maybe a lot of them. I had a bad knee and a solid savings account, and a journal that was almost full and a rust and gold scarf that I wore every single day because I'd stopped saving things for occasions that someone else would decide were special enough. From Fez, I took a train to Casablanca, not because I had a reason to, but because I'd always wanted to say I had. The city surprised me less old, more restless, the ocean right there at the edge of it like it was waiting to make a point. I found a small hotel near the Corniche and walked the seawall in the evening wind and thought about my husband Richard, who had walked away, and the husband he might have been if we'd gotten to be braver together younger. I wasn't angry about it anymore. It was just a fact, like the wind. I called Sophie that evening. She answered on the first ring, slightly breathless, like she'd been waiting near the phone. Grandma. Her voice did something complicated in my chest. Hi, sweetheart. Oh my God, I have so many questions. Are you safe? Is the food incredible? Did you ride a camel? I told her I hadn't ridden a camel, and she said that was probably smart, and I laughed, and she laughed, and for a few minutes we talked the way we used to when she was younger, and would call me from her bedroom after school, not about anything important, just to talk. Then she got quieter. Dad's been really weird since you left. Like, not angry weird, sad weird. I waited. I think he knows he messed up. Like, actually knows, not just says it. He keeps looking at his phone and then not calling. Mom told him he needs to say something real or say nothing, but he keeps doing this thing where he starts a text and deletes it. I pictured my son at the kitchen table in Tuscany, typing and deleting, typing and deleting. It didn't make me feel powerful. It just made me feel tired, and also, underneath the tired, something like hope. Tell him he doesn't need to send the perfect message, I said. He just needs to send a true one. Sophie was quiet for a moment. That's really good advice. Write it down. It works for more than just this. She laughed again, softer. Are you coming home soon? Not yet, I said, but soon. I flew into Lisbon because the ticket was cheaper, and because I'd heard the Fado music could reach into a person and rearrange something, and I wanted to see if that was true. It was. I found a small guest house run by a retired schoolteacher named Concison, who made coffee so strong it was almost a statement. My room had a window that looked onto a cobbled street, where trams groaned past in the mornings, and cats slept in the afternoons on the warm stones. I felt comfortable there immediately. The way you feel comfortable in a place that doesn't need anything from you. On the second evening, Concison pointed me to a fado bar 3 streets away. No sign, just an open door and the smell of wine, and the sound of something that seemed to be coming from underground. I found a seat at a small table near the wall. The singer was a woman in her 50s with close-cropped hair and a face that had lived every minute of whatever she was singing about. I don't speak Portuguese. I understood every word. She sang about longing, about the specific kind of grief that comes not from losing something but from realizing too late that you had it. Saudade. Conceição had told me untranslatable, the Portuguese said, though I thought Americans just hadn't gotten around to naming it yet. I had felt that feeling. I had felt it for years without knowing what to call it. I sat with my hands in my lap and let it land. My phone buzzed on the walk home. A voicemail from my son. I stopped under a streetlight on the cobblestones and played it. His voice was different from the earlier messages. Quieter, less rehearsed. Mom, I don't have a speech. I know I'm supposed to, and I've tried to write it 3 times, and it keeps coming out like an excuse, so I'll just say it plain. We should have brought you. I've been telling myself you'd be more comfortable at home, and I knew when I was saying it that it wasn't true. I said it because it was easier than doing the harder thing, which was actually making sure you were part of our lives instead of the edge of them. I'm sorry. That's all. I'm sorry. Call me when you want to. I'll be here. I stood on the cobblestones for a long time after the message ended. The truth was, I had needed to hear that. Not because it fixed anything an apology can't unbuild years of being treated like furniture, but because it meant he'd finally looked honestly at the shape of things. And that was a beginning, a real one. I didn't call back that night. I went home and wrote in my journal instead. The apology I waited years for came when I was standing on cobblestones in Lisbon at 10 o'clock at night in a cardigan Sophie gave me, and I felt grateful for it, and also free of it at the same time. That's not a contradiction. That's just what it feels. I rode a tram up the hill and walked back down because my knee could handle the downward direction better, and I'd learned to work with what I had instead of apologizing for it. I bought a small blue tile at a market that wasn't for anyone, just for me, to sit on my windowsill at home and remind me of the afternoon light on the Tahoe. On my last evening, I called my son back. He answered quickly, like he'd been keeping the phone close. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I said. We were quiet for a moment. "I got your message," I told him. "Thank you for sending the true one," he exhaled. "Sophie told me you said that." "Good." I hoped she would. Another pause, but not an uncomfortable one. The kind of pause that means two people are figuring out who they are to each other now. "I want to do it differently," he said. "I don't know exactly what that looks like yet." "That's okay," I said. "I don't need you to know yet. I just need you to mean it." I mean it. I believed him. Not because the past had changed, it hadn't, but because I could hear in his voice that something in him had. People can surprise you when you give them a real reason to look at themselves. Not an accusation, just an absence. My leaving had said everything I'd spent years swallowing. He'd heard it. "I'm coming home next week," I said. "Can I pick you up from the airport?" I thought about it. "Yes," I said, "but come alone. I want to talk. Just us, before I see everyone else." "Okay. And bring coffee. The airport stuff is terrible." He laughed. "Just a small one. The first real one I'd heard from him in a long time. I came home on a Tuesday. The airport was bright and loud and smelled of fast food and industrial cleaning product, which is to say it smelled like America, like the specific, ordinary reality of the place I had always lived and sometimes forgotten to be glad for. My son was waiting at arrivals. He was holding 2 cups of coffee, and he looked older than I remembered, which I supposed was because I'd been gone long enough to see it. He looked, also, like someone who hadn't slept much and was trying not to show it. He handed me my coffee before he said anything else. Then he hugged me, not briefly, not a polite hug, but the kind that lasted long enough to mean something. In the car, we talked for almost 2 hours, not about Morocco or Lisbon or Fez, though I told him some of it. We talked about the years, the slow accretion of assumptions, the way families can mean well and still diminish the people they love by reducing them to what they need rather than who they are. He didn't defend himself. He just listened, and when he spoke honestly, and when he didn't know what to say, he said so instead of filling the space with something hollow. It wasn't a reconciliation scene from a movie. There was no dramatic moment where everything clicked into place. It was 2 people in a car in afternoon traffic, figuring out how to be honest with each other after a long time of not being honest. That was enough. More than enough. It was the thing itself. The house was exactly how I'd left it, Sophie's crayon drawing on the fridge, the key still under the mat where Diane had replaced it, the cat asleep on the armchair as though nothing remarkable had happened, and perhaps, from the cat's perspective, it hadn't. I put my bag down in the hallway and walked from room to room slowly, the same furniture, the same pictures on the walls, but I wasn't the same person who had left. And that meant the rooms were different too, in the way that they feel different after you've learned something the walls hadn't witnessed. I put the blue tile on the windowsill. Then I made tea and sat at the kitchen table and opened my journal one more time. Things I know now, I wrote at the top of a fresh page. Silence isn't patience. Sometimes it's just a habit you forgot you could break. The people who love you may not know how to see you until you show them what it looks like when you're not there. You can start moving at 67 and it still counts as movement. A rust and gold scarf is not too much. You are not too much. A bad knee is not a reason. Fear is not a reason. Other people's comfort is not a reason. You always had a passport. You just kept waiting for permission to use it. I paused. The afternoon light came through the kitchen window and caught the blue tile on the sill and held it. You were never waiting to be included, I wrote. You were waiting to include yourself. And when you finally did, the world was right there, exactly where it had always been, waiting for you to show up. I closed the journal, set it on the table, picked up my phone and called Sophie. She answered laughing, already talking before the call had fully connected. Something about a drawing she'd made, something about Berlin, something about a boy who had noticed her, and for once she didn't care whether he noticed her or not. I listened. I didn't need to be anywhere else. I was exactly where I'd chosen to be.